When I was 16 years old at a high school close to here, Ridgemont High School, very diverse high school, and it's an incredible place where it became one of the first peer mediation programs for high school students in the country. And so I was trained to help my peers resolve conflict. And what I found with the first mediation I was able to do, and there's some funny stories about how I got even chosen as a peer mediator, but I don't have time for it, but is I realized that there's so much conflict that ends up putting people more in harm's way. And so schools would, basically kick young people out of school, sometimes suspensions, sometimes expulsions, for things that had to do with conflicts about girlfriends and boyfriends. Not to do about their studies, not about their ability to graduate. And nowadays, a lot of young people are put back into neighborhoods where they don't have parental supervision, and they're more at risk of being recruited by gangs and and drug dealers than just peacefully coexisting until they're allowed back entry into the school. So my journey started as a high school student and went on to starting an organization called UCAN, which some of you have heard of, maybe some of you haven't. But 15 years in, we started the organization in 1997. We've trained over 35,000 young people in how to resolve conflict in more peaceful and healthy ways. And so we've done that work in everything from elementary schools to high schools, and we've done a lot of work in youth detention centers and even in federal penitentiaries. So why are we doing this work? Well, we believe that the solution to some of the issues in the future begin with our children and youth. And that Canada, as a forward G8 country, has a lot of work to do, I think, in terms of really equipping our young people for the conflicts of the future. And so we're happy to play a role. One of the opportunities I had a few years into UCAN is I was asked to join a group of advisors from across the country to serve on the Law Commission of Canada. And that was a huge honor for a young person. I was in my young 20s, actually I was getting towards my mid-20s. But I had the opportunity to meet all these great minds across Canada, to look at legislation in a creative way, to take a look at what we could advise the government on in terms of positive change. Towards the end of my advisory, we started talking a lot about participatory justice and taking a look at not only restorative justice, but how do we approach democracy, and how do we ensure that all the legislation and policies coming from government, my lens was engages young people and puts protective factors around young people and enables young people to build on their assets instead of always punishing them based on what we determine are their weaknesses and failures. So some exciting work, and I remember this high-level meeting that we had with the Department of Justice, and I just remember this kind of aha moment where we're kind of sitting around with the folks that were running the Law Commission and a few advisors, and some of the justice officials. We said, it's so limited to what we can do through this department. And I have no disrespect for the Department of Justice. There's a lot of great work being done. But at that time, most of the budget, as today, goes towards litigation. And we all know the strengths and the weaknesses of our current justice system and the cost, the unbelievable cost of litigation. So we said what we need is a Department of Peace. And so I'll fast forward it about 5 or 6 years later, and I had some of the amazing organizers in this room, kind of sitting in office of Brian Strom, a colleague of mine, with the amazing guy with the Canadian Institute for Conflict Resolution, right next to us here at St. Paul University. And they were showing me all the work that they've done, and there's an amazing graphic over here on this notion of Department of Peace. And it's one of those things where it's like, wow, that's so amazing. Here's this conversation we had 5 or 6 years ago that probably no one even knew that that we had, and who knows? I don't know how long you guys have been working on this, a decade, maybe more, I don't know. But I was just so amazed that there had been some real intellectual work done to kind of say, okay, so what would it look like, and what would it accomplish? In 2000, what pushed me to kind of say, what can UCAN do beyond just teaching peer mediation to schools? UNESCO came up with, out of Paris, this notion, the International Decade of Culture of Peace. So many of you might remember the posters. It was really incredible. We got all revved up and jived, and then unfortunately the next year was the year of water, the next year was something else. We're like, whoa, wait a second, we still want to go with the culture of peace. There was 6 notions that they threw onto their posters that we've incorporated into when young people become members of the organization. UCAN's unique. Our board of directors are all governed by young people, but they all signed a pledge that actually comes out of that year. 1, respect all life. 2, reject violence. 3, share with others. 4, listen to understand. 5, preserve the planet. And 6, rediscover solidarity. So these amazing pledges, and there's a lot of really cool work that went into the discovery of those 6 pledges, but to me really speaks to what can happen if we focus, whether through the Department of Peace or some other mechanism, but in Canada, to really say, okay, how do we ensure that the decisions, the policy, the legislation we make exercises these 6 principles, and to me, one of the exciting things is that, if you look across the country in terms of grassroots youth organizations that are popping out of communities and neighborhoods, there's a lot of focus, and rightfully so, on climate change. There's a lot of focus on young people that want to deal with racism, deal with some of these issues. So I think that's really exciting. And sometimes, as we've seen in Quebec predominantly, youth activism can turn violent. It can turn, kind of ugly. So the messages get lost in terms of how they actually choose to communicate their discomfort and try to create social change. And so, out of that, I do believe that there needs to be a focus on peace. I remember some conversations I had with young people in Saskatchewan about the overrepresentation of Aboriginal peoples in Saskatchewan jails. And it's a phenomenon right across the country. It's not unique to Saskatchewan. But these young people were so ticked off about it. They were talking about weapons. They were talking about all these different things. And so to me, as an organization that did a lot of fundraising, UCAN's now 35 staff across Canada. It takes a lot of money to pay those staff. We're still not enough staff to make the kind of difference that we'd like to make. But fundraising is very difficult in this field. You can talk to the Department of Justice, but what you're talking about doesn't really relate there. You can talk to Human Resources Development Canada. What you talk about, unless it has an employment focus, may not really resonate there. So then you get bumped to public safety. Well, they're corrections, they're policing, where is the place to talk about proactive, preventative strategies to deal with situations like you might be dealing with in terms of a youth culture that's emanating in a place like Saskatchewan. We remember conflicts in Burn Church. We remember conflicts in all these different places. And so where is the capacity federally to kind of take a look at what's going on? What's really exciting to me is the Department of National Defense, right, has mediators across the country. Treasury Board has a dispute resolution department, justice, corrections. There's a lot of people trained up in the skill sets that we're trying to teach young people. It's really cool. But how can you maximize that? To me, if there isn't a department that can kind of pull some of those expertise together and kind of look more holistically across the country, look at trouble spots, work with the provinces and territories, which I know federally is not always easy to do, but in ways to really push the fabric of peace in our communities. We've had discussions with world leaders in our work, which is kind of exciting. As a youth organization, we never saw ourselves working, in a way that would bring us to Paris, talking to people at UNESCO, talking to urban habitat with World Urban Forums and different events that we've been invited to. And we talked to them about conflict zones and about the challenges where, as adults are negotiating peace treaties, what's happening with young people? And a lot of time what's happening is the young people are just picking up more arms. They're recruited into more thinking about the hatred of the other. And so we talked about, wow, what would it look like in the future if we had a cadre of youth who are trained to actually do peace-building activities. Oh, my time is up, so I'm going to make this really short. Peace-building activities, youth to youth, while this is happening. And so I guess just to sum up, there's potential. In Canada, we have hundreds of thousands of young people trained in the cadets movement. We work a lot with cadets. I think it's a great program. It's really exciting. But what would happen if we had hundreds of thousands of young people caught up in the training that could actually not only enable them to help develop peace and peacemaking in their own neighborhoods and communities, but actually do that internationally as well. So I'll just leave it there, but thanks for your time.